The war didn't end for Sergeant James Miller when he stepped off the plane and onto American soil. In many ways, the real war was just beginning. He had brought the battlefield home with him, carrying it in the silence of his empty house and the sudden, terrifying flashbacks that came without warning. For 3 years, he lived in a state of constant hypervigilance, unable to sleep without nightmares, unable to walk into a grocery store without scanning for threats. The doctors called it severe PTSD, a label that felt heavy and suffocating, like a backpack filled with stones that he could never take off. He had tried therapy, medication, and isolation, but nothing seemed to quiet the noise in his head or the shaking in his hands. His therapist recommended a service dog, a companion trained to interrupt anxiety attacks and create a buffer in crowds. But the waiting list for a trained service dog was 3 years long, and the cost was upwards of $20,000, money he didn't have. Desperate and lonely, James decided to visit the local animal shelter, hoping to find a dog that he could perhaps train himself. He walked down the rows of kennels, the barking sounding like chaos, making his heart race and his palms sweat. Then he saw him, a massive block-headed Pitbull with cropped ears and scars on his muzzle, sitting in the very last cage. The sign on his door said Gunner, and below it, in smaller letters, it read, "Surrendered by owner. Resource guarding issues. Experienced home only." Most people looked at Gunner and saw a fighting dog, a dangerous weapon that should be feared and avoided at all costs. But James looked at the dog and saw something else entirely. He saw a fellow soldier who had seen too much combat. Gunner wasn't barking. He was sitting at attention, his amber eyes locked on James, watching him with an intensity that felt like a question. James asked the volunteer to take him out, and the young woman hesitated, warning him that Gunner was a lot of dog. When the cage door opened, Gunner didn't lunge or pull. He walked out slowly, his muscles rippling under his short gray coat. He walked straight up to James, sniffed his combat boots, and then leaned his entire 90-pound body against James's legs. It was a lean of trust, a desperate plea for connection from a dog who had been judged by his appearance his entire life. James knelt down and buried his hands in the thick fur around Gunner's neck, feeling the dog's slow, steady heartbeat. In that moment, 2 broken warriors found each other in the middle of a noisy shelter, and a silent pact was made. Adopting Gunner was a risk. The landlord was skeptical, the insurance was high, and the neighbors crossed the street when they saw him. The stigma against pit bulls is a powerful force, a prejudice that assumes violence based on the shape of a dog's head. But James knew that Gunner wasn't a monster. He was just misunderstood, much like James felt misunderstood by civilians who hadn't seen war. The first few weeks were a challenge of establishing boundaries and trust, proving to Gunner that he didn't need to guard his food anymore. James started training him with basic commands, sit, stay, heel, and was shocked by the dog's intelligence and desire to work. Pit bulls are working dogs at heart. They want a job, they want to please, and they have an endurance that is unmatched. James decided to train Gunner as his psychiatric service dog, a task that many professional trainers said was impossible for a rescue pit bull. They told him that pit bulls were too reactive, too stubborn, and too unpredictable to handle the delicate work of PTSD support. But James saw Gunner's sensitivity. He saw how the dog would freeze when James's breathing changed, watching him with concern. The training became their mission, a daily routine that gave both of them a reason to get out of bed in the morning. They started with blocking, teaching Gunner to stand behind James in lines, creating a physical barrier between him and strangers. Gunner picked it up in 2 days, understanding instinctively that his job was to watch his handler's six. Next was grounding, a technique where the dog nudges the handler or paws at them to interrupt a panic attack or dissociation. One afternoon, James was sitting on the couch, lost in a memory of a convoy in the desert, his heart rate spiking to dangerous levels. He didn't even realize he was shaking until he felt a heavy paw slam onto his thigh, followed by a wet nose pushing into his hand. Gunner whined, a low, demanding sound that pulled James out of the flashback and back into the living room. James looked down, and Gunnar licked his hand, his amber eyes saying, "I'm here. You're safe. We are home." It was the first time James had come out of a flashback that quickly, and he realized that Gunnar wasn't just a pet, he was a lifesaver. As their training progressed, they began to venture out into the world, facing the dual challenge of PTSD and breed discrimination. Walking into a store with a 90-pound Pitbull wearing a service dog vest drew stares, whispers, and sometimes rude comments. People would pull their children away, muttering about dangerous dogs and questioning the legitimacy of his vest. James felt the anger rising, the defensive instinct to yell, but Gunnar remained calm, his focus entirely on James. He walked in a perfect heel, ignoring the carts, the noise, and the judgment, modeling the discipline that James was trying to find. The real test came 3 months later, on the 4th of July, a holiday that is a nightmare for veterans with PTSD. The unexpected explosions of fireworks sound exactly like mortar fire, triggering a primal fight-or-flight response. James decided to try watching the town fireworks from a distance, thinking he was ready, thinking he could handle it. But when the grand finale started, a series of loud, booming concussions that shook the ground, James crumbled. He fell to his knees in the park, hands over his ears, eyes squeezed shut, convinced he was back in the danger zone. The world was spinning, his chest was tight, and he couldn't breathe. He was in the middle of a full-blown panic attack. In the chaos, Gunnar went into action, executing the deep-pressure therapy maneuver they had practiced in the living room. He climbed onto James's lap, pressing his heavy chest against James's torso, using his weight to ground him. He began to lick James's face aggressively and rhythmically, forcing James to focus on the sensation of the rough tongue. Gunnar created a physical cocoon, shielding James from the flashing lights and the noise, becoming his bunker. It took 10 minutes, but slowly. James's breathing synced with Gunnar's slow, steady respiration. When James finally opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was Gunnar's face, calm and steady amidst the noise. He wrapped his arms around the dog's thick neck and cried, releasing tears that he had been holding back for 3 years. Gunnar didn't move. He stayed right there, anchoring James to the earth until the last firework faded into silence. That night changed everything. It proved that the bond between them was stronger than the trauma they carried. It also gave James the confidence to speak up, to become an advocate for both veterans and bully breeds. He started an Instagram page documenting their journey, showing the world the gentle soul behind the muscular exterior. He posted videos of Gunnar sleeping with a teddy bear, Gunnar wearing pajamas, Gunnar gently taking treats from a toddler. The comments section filled with people who said Gunnar had changed their perception of pit bulls forever. They saw a dog who wasn't a killer but a healer, a dog who had taken his own second chance and used it to save a human life. One day, a woman approached them in the park looking at Gunnar's vest with a skeptical expression. "Is that a pit bull?" she asked, her hand tightening on her own small dog's leash. "I didn't know they could be service dogs." James smiled, looked down at Gunnar, who was sitting perfectly at his side, and said, "He's not just a service dog, ma'am. He's my medic." He explained how Gunnar woke him up from nightmares, how he checked empty rooms before James entered, how he sensed anxiety. The woman's expression softened, and she asked if she could pet him, a small victory in the war against prejudice. Gunnar sat patiently while the woman scratched his ears, his tail thumping a slow, happy rhythm against James's leg. It wasn't just about saving James anymore. It was about showing the world that redemption is possible for anyone. Gunnar had been discarded, judged, and labeled dangerous, but given a job and a purpose, he became a hero. James had been broken, isolated, and labeled damaged, but with Gunnar by his side, he became a leader again. They saved each other. 2 outcasts who found their place in the world by holding on to the other end of the leash. Life with a service dog isn't perfect. There are still bad days, still nightmares, and still moments of anxiety. But now James doesn't face them alone. He faces them with 90 pounds of muscle and loyalty by his side. Gunnar gave James the freedom to live his life again, to go to restaurants, to travel, to reconnect with his family. And in return, James gave Gunnar a home where he is judged by the content of his character, not the shape of his head. When they sleep at night, Gunnar sleeps at the foot of the bed, facing the door, forever on guard duty. James sleeps soundly, knowing that his battle buddy is watching over him, ready to chase away the ghosts. The bond between a veteran and their service dog is sacred. It is a relationship forged in the fire of survival. Whatever scars Gunnar had from his past life have healed over with love, leaving only the white marks on his muzzle, and whatever scars James carries are slowly fading, smoothed over by the constant unconditional love of his dog. This story is a reminder that sometimes the best medicine doesn't come in a pill bottle. It comes with 4 paws and a wet nose. It is a reminder to look past the label, whether it is PTSD or Pitbull, and see the individual soul underneath. There are thousands of veterans waiting for help, and thousands of dogs in shelters, waiting for a purpose. Bringing them together is not just an adoption, it is a strategic alliance that saves 2 lives at once. If you are a veteran struggling, or if you know someone who is, please know that there is hope, and it might be waiting at your local shelter. And if you're looking for a dog, consider the block-headed one in the back of the shelter, the one everyone else is afraid of. He might just be the hero you have been waiting for, the one who will stand by you when the rest of the world walks away. Gunnar went from being a liability to a lifeline, proving that you can't judge a book or a dog by its cover. Please like this video to help spread awareness about the incredible potential of shelter dogs as service animals. Share this story to fight the stigma against pit bulls and to support the veterans who fight battles long after the war is over. Subscribe to the Second Chance Sanctuary to witness more stories of resilience, redemption, and the healing power of love. And tell us in the comments, has an animal ever helped you through a difficult time in your life? We want to hear your story. We read every comment because this community is built on the shared belief that every life is worth saving. Thank you for watching Gunnar and James's journey and for being part of our mission to give every underdog a second chance. We will see you in the next video where we continue to shine a light on the amazing stories that happen when love wins.